to you about the Agile Value Management Office, or the Agile VMO. So first of all, let's define what it is. It is an organization that sits usually at the middle level of the hierarchy. That is, one level above the teams and a level below the executive management, but really drives end-to-end delivery as well as organizational change. So there are two main functions of the Agile VMO. One is to drive organizational change, and then the other is to drive the delivery of end-to-end value or end-to-end value flow.
So one of the biggest challenges in most organizations really is it's well up front from the actual Agile delivery teams. It's how do I get the work chunked up so that we can work on it in a more incremental manner. And everything about most modern organizations is set up against that principle of flow, if you will. Typically, there's a big, long funding model in the front that takes months to go through. There's a long requirements cycle which has to happen. That's usually done in a very linear waterfall kind of way. And oftentimes in many organizations, all of the requirements are already defined and then given to the Agile team to start iterating on. And this is often 6 to 9 months after the idea was initially conceived by the business. The idea around the VMO is to start chunking all of that up so that it's more of a seamless, continuous flow into IT. This requires that the business get a lot more granular about what we're trying to achieve and when we're trying to achieve it. Trying to figure out what we want to get done from a business result standpoint this quarter, not necessarily this year, but this quarter, what are we going to put out to market and what are the outcomes we expect to achieve? Really focusing on just a handful of requirements or features that we think are going to get us those business results, and starting to get those flowing through all of these silos and steps and processes and different levels of analysts and whatnot, so that it can hit the teams and the teams can start building and deploying. What we want is a continuous pipeline of delivery. And the VMO, one of its jobs is to really enable this continuous flow by making the business be more granular about what it's trying to achieve, and then organizing all the various intermediate steps so that they can start chunking the work and getting it flowing over to IT.
So I want to talk a little bit more about what the VMO is organizationally, and also sort of to define it, what it's not. So the VMO is an end-to-end group, or that's looking at driving end-to-end value, and therefore it needs to be cross-functional, as in it needs to have business folks, it needs to have IT folks, and it has to have other production folks, and even some customers and such on occasion. It is not a transient group. It's going to stay there together for as long as the product model is, then therefore we're moving from a project to a product type model. And then the VMO is going to track the 4 elements of Mick Kirsten's flow framework. So they're going to track the flow of features, they're going to track the flow of defects, they're going to track the flow of risks, and also technical debt. So at a level above the team, you have this organizational group that's more of a management focus. They're looking down the pike while the teams are executing and getting stuff done. But what the VMO is doing is they're removing obstacles and making sure that at the feature level or the capability level, they're going to make sure that things are moving and value is flowing across all of the multiple end-to-end teams. Also, part of the charter is organizational change management. So driving change management through education, training, and such, that's part of their duties, but they are not an Agile Center of Excellence. An Agile Center of Excellence is pushing through certain practices, maybe getting to technical practices like TDD, maybe into management Scrum practices like a Scrum of Scrums. And so while an Agile Center of Excellence is focused on making sure that the state of the art in Agile matches the best in the industry or is bleeding and such, the Agile VMO is more focused internally on getting things done and driving organizational change. So that's the difference between an Agile Center of Excellence and an Agile VMO. What about the difference between a PMO, Program Management or Project Managed Office, and a VMO? Well, the PMO historically has been focused on optimizing a project model. And a project, as we know, is a transitional entity, if you will. It has a definite start and a definite end, and we bring together people, we unfortunately call them resources in that model, and we try to get stuff done and we optimize for that model. Now, if we shift to a product model, now we have our cross-functional end-to-end teams. They're standing teams. They stay together over the long haul. And then the job of the VMO becomes driving value in that particular situation in a different model. Do some of the skills from PMOs or program managers or project managers transfer over? Absolutely. In fact, we need highly skilled people who have been trained in cost management, revenue management, vendor management, risk management, because this is the level at which those skills can really make a difference and can really be applied in the value management office in a different model, but to drive value nevertheless.
I was speaking with an executive one time, talking with this person about how I thought that if we worked with them, we might be able to get them to a much more frequent delivery model. That maybe we could go from their normal annual deliveries, which they've been doing over the years, down to quarterly deliveries or even more frequent than that. And this executive said, well, I don't think we can make our projects that small. Right? So the notion in their mind is that a project is equivalent to a release. And that a project couldn't have many releases of value over its time frame. And this is the fundamental, I think, mental model that has to shift as we move from a PMO or project-centric model to a VMO or value-centric model. Is within the projects that we have to operate in, if we have to operate in a projectized world, which many of us do, how can we deliver value more frequently? And in order to do this, it's going to require a significant amount of change. And this is where the change management aspect of the VMO comes into play as well. How people work, how they're measured, what the artifacts are, what the timing around all this is, how the different functions interact with each other. There's a significant amount of change there. And when you start moving people's cheese around in a large way, it creates a lot of confusion sometimes and a little bit of angst. And the VMO needs to manage that as well. So it really has these two functions. How do I get the flow going through the organization? And then how do I manage the people aspect of that as we introduce these changes into the organization?
Yeah. And I want to draw a reference to something that's pretty well known out in the industry, especially in the military, and that's this concept of the team of teams, made popular by the book and videos of General Stanley McChrystal. Within our own organization, the VMO can become a team of teams. That is, they're pulling together the work of multiple teams. They're aligning it with the strategic focus and strategic direction of the organization that's coming down from leadership. But now, what we're doing now is we're pushing down the accountability and the empowerment for making those day-to-day decisions down to the VMO, and the VMO might actually push it down to the end-to-end teams. It doesn't have to go all the way up to the ivory tower, to the executive chamber, and then all the way down. Our decision-making velocity is improving, and decisions are being pushed down to the lowest level where they can be made very quickly by this team of teams. So very simply, if you want to think about a mental analogy of what the VMO is, it is a team of teams, one level above the end-to-end value stream teams, if you will.
Another thing that's going to have to be looked at as we move to this value flow-centric model is the metrics that we use. Commonly within a PMO, we're looking at scope metrics and schedule metrics and all that sort of thing, and that's fine. But as we move to a flow model, we're going to have to bring in more of the flow metrics, and our VMO really has to look at the flow through the organization. Things like cycle time, WIP. Are we trying to do too many features at the same time? Are they flowing through the organization with the right speed? Are we getting them broken down to the right granularity so that the teams can consume them and deliver them with confidence? All of these things have to be looked at as well. As we start to get this flow going through the organization, it's going to start to impact a lot of the governance models that we have in place in terms of internal audit, sign-offs, approvals, risk, et cetera, et cetera. And the VMO is going to have to manage through some of that with those stakeholders in the organizations. As we work with VMOs at various clients and organizations, these are things which often come to play and things that the VMO really needs to work out how the governance model is going to change. And that's why we need leaders of different levels and have that leadership to be cross-functional as well so that we can have the right players in the room to help us sort through those complex topics.
So with our VMO, what we can do is to start to experiment and figure out what is the appropriate level of control and governance and oversight that our team needs so that they can be in alignment with the overall purpose and direction and the mission of our organization, but also make sure that we are not overloading them or being over bureaucratic in our regulation and governance. So that balance between autonomy and alignment can best be driven by the Agile Value Management Office.